like we was in school, there was throwing glass at black people and little kids.
I think it's gonna be all right if everybody come and stop being scared, because shoot, I don't think there's nothing to be scared of.
Mind telling me a bit more about yourself and your work?
Yeah. So I'm a longtime National Public Radio or public radio reporter. I helped create a national show called Living on Earth, which is an environmental program, and Here and Now, which I created like a quarter of a century ago, and so I was a national reporter in Washington, and I've reported on everything. I focus now on environment. I like science reporting, but I also do general assignment. I like science stories. That's really been my bailiwick. I was given this assignment way back when as a special project. I was given plenty of time. I really delved deep. It was a hard story to tell. I had to tell it in two parts. I was given an extraordinary amount of resources and time and airtime, which is very precious. And I knew about it because I kind of lived through it, although I wasn't in Boston at the time. And so I knew the general outlines of it, and I knew some of the people that had been involved in it. The mayor, for example, Menino was somebody who I had known, and the head of Metco, Jeune, what's her name, who has since left. She became actually it started before busing, which was to take people from the minority communities and bring them to communities in suburban communities. That was predated the busing issue, but it really does define Boston. I mean, it is a definitive, and it still is to my mind. And the question that you ask is it in the minds of other people? And I think largely, in general, history is forgotten. What Boston is an enormously historic town in terms of its racial relations and its significance. I think there's a poverty of appreciation for that in the large sense, excuse me, and in busing in general. I will say that I was very happy to hear that these two pieces were incorporated in at least in the Boston Public Schools curriculum. I don't know the exact dimensions of that, but so that was very heartening. And I think because what I tried to do was tell a human story about busing, right? And I told it very dispassionately, right? It's not an alarmist piece. It's an expository piece of reporting, right? I didn't try to say they were right, they were wrong. I do feel, so I'm not sure if that answers your question adequately. You can keep on probing. I have some other thoughts, but they're a little bit tangential to this question.
So one of the things that I'm trying to, I guess, uncover is why sort of like if you ask 10 Bostonians to tell you about a piece of this city's history, busing is never mentioned, and it feels like either there's just an amnesia around what happened in the city, or it's not being taught. And I know there are a few books, I've watched a few documentaries about busing, but it's not alive in the city in the way that other portions of history are in the city. And so I'm wondering, what is the cause of that? Like, why is this particular part of our history like, completely buried?
From a school's perspective, I don't know.
Mm.
From a larger perspective, I think there's a general disregarding of history. That if it didn't happen yesterday, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And the other part is that it's I think it is a function of simply time that people don't, I mean, most of the people that are in the city are young. I mean, I would guess that half the population of the city is under 35, 30. I mean, so it's enormous. This stuff is ancient history. This is World War I. This is, so why do I have to learn it? I'm living the dream. I'm living the life. I don't know. I think it should be an integral part, but why it's not emphasized, if it's emphasized in Boston School, I don't know. I really don't know that. I don't know if there's any sense of collective amnesia. I do think societally, this society has no memory. They don't want to know history. And I can tell you this, and I work with very, very intelligent people, right? Usually they're very young, and it's not their fault. And they don't know what they don't know. There's no context, there's no dates. That's why I started the piece, the first piece, which I just listened over just to hear how what I did. So I had some kind of perspective on it from this distance. And it starts off being saying those of people who lived through, Kennedy's assassination and 9/11 and the date September 12th, 20 to 1974, because most people didn't. Most people haven't. Most of the people have been born, my kids have been born after 9/11. They don't know what happened before. They're not taught the context. So I think it's part of that general landscape. And I would say that it's really to the deficiency of society that civics is not taught and history is not taught, and our own history.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can walk around Boston and the history is real. You can go to Malcolm X's house. You can go to the Freedom House. You can walk the Freedom Trail. You can see Faneuil Hall that was used for that was paid for with slave money. You can see it's there, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It really pisses me off, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one of the points that I'm trying to make, is that you can walk down Boston and you can see like monuments and like plaques about this happened here. This was where Mary Dyer was executed by so and so but when it comes to like busing, there's like almost no institutional acknowledgement of like busing in the city.
It should be an integral part of the city, right? I mean, honestly, it was so huge. I mean, for 3 years, this place was a war zone.
Yeah, could you talk a bit more about that era? I know you said you lived through it, but not in the city itself. What do you remember about that era?
Okay, so 1974, before I had been in Boston in 1969, because I was going to go to college here and decided against it. And at 1969, Boston was a down and out city. It really was. In the post-World War II, it boomed and then it bust. And the plug had really been pulled. It was a gritty, ugly city. Nothing like what it looks like today. So I wasn't here in 1970, in the 70s. I did know that the racism was very deep, and it was by geography and it was by ethnicity, and it was, and there was this enormous, you have to understand why there was busing. Why was there busing? Because the northern migration into Boston from the South after World War II was enormous. I mean, if you look at the demographics, the numbers are extraordinary. I mean, right off the chart. then they had this economic malaise in the early 60s, which changed things. So you had this really big booming and population booming, but the place had always been a checkerboard and had a long racist history, as we know. It had a very progressive history early on and after before and after the Civil War. It's a fascinating history, really complex, not easily understood, but the South came north, and the problems of housing, jobs, race discrimination, ethnicity, all manifest themselves, right? And so that was the situation. It created explosive. I mean, that's the thing. The Garrity decision lit the match, right? Now, personally, I think it was a good decision, but poorly implemented and poorly executed and poorly kind of thought out in many ways. It didn't address, and I don't know if this answers your question, but my sense is that this goes much deeper than race, much deeper than class, economics. It goes to culture.
Okay.
And we're seeing it now. History is repeating itself right now.
Yeah.
And we're seeing all of these things manifest themselves. And I do think it's a cultural war that really was being fought. And that's why it's kind of interesting. I think one of the most interesting pieces there is where the head of the woman that was Jeune from McGuire, that's her name, who would become head of Medco, who had been head of Medco. She says, we should have started with sports. And I think she was kind of right there. That is, it should have been someplace where there was a cultural bridge. We had no cultural bridging. It was a forced busing. I think they did need something like that. But why there are no living statues and living memory and integrated into our, not just in Boston. That's the thing. It can't be just in Boston. We have to make it part of American history.
Yeah. Why isn't it? It's so fascinating.
It's hard. It's
hard.
Complex. It's not easily told. It happens in a context. There should be required courses. There aren't. I don't know why it's not part of the curriculum. It damn well should be.
Yeah. Well, you hear so much about sort of the South and the South's resistance to integration. And I think there's a bit of hiding behind progressive values in the North to sort of avoid having to talk about the North's role in perpetuating discrimination and segregation.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is you're hitting on something very, very important, that we talk a good game. And progressive values are skin deep. And they're not much deeper. I mean, this place is a checkerboard. We're more segregated than ever.
Yeah.
Not less.
Yeah.
And it happens in very profound ways. I mean, I live in Watertown, right? I can go days and days without seeing people these days, but I can go days and days without seeing a Black person or Hispanic, unless they're doing critical jobs like, working in hospitals. I go to a hospital, I go to the doctor, I go down the street. I just spoke to across next door. I'm looking out the window now. And I just spoke to some contractors who were doing some construction work. They're Hispanic.
Yeah.
I mean, but we're going past each other.
Yeah.
We don't have a place to meet, to be.